Hello! So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the DAWs, other software, and hardware that we're going to be using in MUS 3702. So because we're teaching all of this online, it's a little difficult. There is a lot of software and a lot of it costs a serious ton of cash, which makes it hard for people to buy. There are lots of different programs that can be used, like Pro Tools, Cubase, Nuendo, Sequoia for DAWs, Reason, Cherry Voltage Modular, Taskman, Falcon, etc. for synthesis. But some are platform specific, like Logic will only work on a Mac and Sequoia will only work on a PC. And while there are online DAWs like Soundtrap and Soundation, they're generally worse than GarageBand. So that's kind of out. So a couple of considerations that I had in revising and tweaking my plans for the semester are really summed up best by Vanessa Thiem Ament in her book, The Holy Grail, which is that the more one relies on bells and whistles to do the job, the less likely that person will ever develop the true craftsmanship to dazzle, and that any veteran sound professional will tell you that technology is the tool that helps, not makes, the skilled craftsman. So what that means is that really teaching the core concepts is going to be more effective for you, the students, in the long run than teaching specific software, especially for an online class. Even though we will use some specific packages, particularly Fmod and Unity, it's just better if you know how to do things like splice, punch, overdub, than to know how to do that using specific hotkeys in Pro Tools. So here's the deal. You can use any of the following DAWs and plugins that I've included in this list for regular coursework and can use your full arsenal of purchased plugins for projects. You just have to freeze and flatten those tracks out first. I will allow some other programs on a case-by-case basis. You just have to ask. But let's take a look at the list. So for DAWs, you can use any of these, and they are all also installed on the computers in Varner 236. There's Ableton Live 10, which has both the standard and the suite versions. Standard is in the lab. I personally use the suite version, and they do have very competitive academic pricing. You can also get that on both Mac or PC, which is very nice. If you're a Mac-only user, there is Logic Pro X, which you can get as part of the $200 Pro Apps Bundle for Education. There is a direct link to it. It's kind of hidden on the Apple site. It is a steal. You basically pay full price for Logic Pro, and you get Final Cut and some other stuff that you'll probably never use, but you get Final Cut for free. Another one that I would strongly consider you to use is Reaper. It's $60, which makes it an absolute steal. It has become my favorite program for just using for recording, mostly because it does some really spectacular stuff with takes and lanes, and it allows you to do absolutely insane track counts, all at 32-bit. It's great. And then if you have to do really crazy stuff like MPE MIDI, guess what? It's built in. It is PC or Mac compatible, but here's the downside. Unlike Ableton or Logic, there are no built-in instruments. Its primary purpose is for recording. So if you go that route, I do have a list of plugins that we'll get to very shortly that will help with giving you some virtual instruments. I also strongly encourage you to install the extensions for Reaper, SWS, S&M, which extends the functionality of the DAW. It gives you some really nice stuff with snapshots that isn't built in. And also Repack, which is hands down the most useful plugin for Reaper ever developed. It allows you to sync with a bunch of GitHub repositories to get additional actions, scripts, instruments, etc. And you just open up Repack and say, I want this. It searches, it downloads, you're done. It's great. For notation, MUS Score, if you don't have a notation editor already, it's quite effective. It will do pretty much everything you want to do in this class. If you do want something a little bit more advanced than that, I am a very strong believer in use whatever you like, except for NoteFlight. Personally, I use Dorico, but I also have used Finale for nearly 20 years before that. For assignments, you will be limited to using the built-in instruments and effects in your DAW of choice, or the following instruments from this list. Dext, which is a Yamaha DX7 virtual instrument. And I have provided a link. There's a very, very cool AI preset generator that will create sound banks for Dext for you. It's very fun. Helm, which is a basic subtractive synthesizer with some really nice MIDI mapping options. Tunefish, which is another subtractive synthesizer / sampler. It's kind of a hybrid instrument. It's very cool. TX16WX, it is a sampler, and it's actually quite powerful. They have both a free and a paid version. The free version is fine. Next is the big one, Spitfire Audio. They have two products. They have Labs, which you can go and just download. All of them are 100% free, and now they just have a really cool download all option, which makes it much faster and easier. They also have the BBC Symphony Discovery, which is free if you fill out their marketing survey and then wait 2 weeks. And yes, it really is 2 weeks, 14 days. But then they will send you a link to download the full thing. I really encourage you to get both of these. They are great plugins. They sound amazing, even if you do have to wait the 2 weeks for BBC Symphony Discovery. Another one that we'll be using is the Surge synthesizer, which has just been updated to include the support for Scala tuning files. Yay! If any of you really want to go with microtonal work, this is the one to use. VCV Rack, which you will recognize from Music Tech 1 and all the free modules. Also, the SoundHack Free Sound and Delay Bundle. These are the plugins from Tom Erb. They are very, very cool. I have a couple of his hardware modules and absolutely love them, and have used Freesound in particular many, many times. Samples will also be very, very useful and necessary in this class. So in addition to recording your own, you can use free samples from freesound.org, the BBC sample library, which will be particularly useful in the Foley section, and also the Internet Archive. If anyone is working with a wavetable, say in Ableton Live, or if you're doing stuff with Alchemy wavetables in Logic, or if you're doing vector synthesis, you may need some single cycle waveforms. You can find a couple of very, very cool free ones at AdventureKid Waveforms and Void Vertex. Just be aware that these are not appropriate for any other use. It is one instance of the waveform. So in order to make use of it, you do have to have a program that knows how to work with that. Later on in the semester, you will definitely need Flucoma, the fluid corpus manipulation tools, and the Recoma scripts, which will integrate that into Reaper. Both of those are free. They're very powerful. You don't have to download them yet because it is quite a bit of information to take in when you start working with them. You will also want Spear as well for signal decomposition and resynthesis. All of those are free. And then finally, during the second half of the semester, you will need to get a copy of Fmod Studio and Unity 3D. Both are free, but you do have to create and register an account in order to get access to them. Some additional free software that I just recommend having on your computer generally: Audacity. It's the Swiss Army knife of audio editors. It is not sufficient for coursework, but it still is useful if you're making minor edits or trimming. I like it. It's great. If you need to do video editing and you don't have a copy of Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve is awesome. They have two versions, the free version and the pro. The free version will be sufficient for most of what you're going to want to do. GIMP, the GNU image manipulation program, is awesome. It is very, very cool for image editing. I used it for all of the images that you'll see in the lectures. But it does not allow you to do any drawing, so it's not a complete Photoshop replacement, and that's where Inkscape comes in, which does vector drawing and allows you to get really, really fine details drawn into existing images or into new SVGs. If you need to do screen recording, in particular, I recommend OBS, the Open Broadcaster System. Very good thing to have. Also VLC, it's just the best media player. If you can't play it in VLC, you can't play it. And then, of course, remember that as an Oakland student, you do get Microsoft Office for free as long as you're enrolled. Please take advantage of that before they realize that students aren't doing that and stop paying for it. For hardware, you can use the hardware in Varner 236 to complete assignments, but if you're going to be working from home, what you will need is the following. You'll need a PC or Mac, no Chromebooks, period. They are not going to work. You will need a MIDI controller with any number of keys, pads, etc. You will need an audio interface and a microphone. And when we're doing Foley work, I recommend having at least 2 microphones, preferably one that is a large diaphragm condenser and one that is a small diaphragm condenser. If you have questions about those, I am more than happy to answer them. You can also get a Zoom recorder like the H1N, the H4N, or the H6N, which doubles as both an interface and a recorder. So you can plug in mics to it on the H4 or the H6 and use it as an audio interface, or you can just use the built-in mics as well. Headphones are going to be required, of course, just to be polite to people around you. But keep in mind, hardware can cost a lot. For example, if you don't want to have to buy a MIDI keyboard, all of the DAWs have a QWERTY to MIDI keyboard feature. It is not great, but you can, in fact, do all the work with it. And if you have questions about buying hardware or want to try and figure out what the best bang for your buck is, I am more than happy to offer gear suggestions as well. Just email me to set up a time and we can go over options, budgets, and figure out what will work for you.